yes, medicine can heal us, but it's really us healing us. And I was reminded of that in that ceremony. A lot of people go to ayahuasca, like, fix me, heal me. And it would take many, many journeys, many years, even after that first one and those tumors went, to get to the root of the trauma, of the blackness, of the cancer root that was in me. Was that because my father was my main abuser for my entire childhood. He molested and raped me for most of my childhood. And so the resentment that I held was so dark and so deep, and it was so separate from who I was, that I had no way to come home to myself fully without the help as this plant ally.
Welcome to Season 4, Episode 5 of Ouroboros Story Hour, True Tales of Healing in Altered States. I'm your host and producer, Bob Cohen. Ouroboros Story Hour is an international monthly unscripted storytelling production that presents humans sharing stories about their experiences with healing and visionary plants, psychedelics, and consciousness hacking practices. Our mission is to promote deep healing and radical acceptance of ourselves and others by sharing and witnessing people's stories. We need your financial support to sustain the project. We've chosen not to sell tickets during the pandemic because of the financial disruptions, but if you can afford it, please send the $10 ticket fee to my Venmo at Bob J. Cohen or to my PayPal at bobjcohen@gmail.com. Our first speaker tonight is going to be Angela Benck. She has worked as a coach for the last 4 years and as an entrepreneur for the last 10. She leads women and men to discover their innate passions. As a spiritual leader in her field, she leads people to their true path. She's a leader of leaders, paving the way for heart and spirituality in business and empowering others to reclaim their inner power and align to serve the whole of the organization. So Angela plans to talk about her call to ayahuasca and her first ceremony experience and healing, which began when she discovered 2 breast tumors in her right breast. And she said, and I quote, "I held the tumor and said to myself, I need to go to the Amazon, or the Amazon needs to come to me." That night, grandmother ayahuasca came to her in a dream with her first healing. Nearly 2 years later, Angela finally sat with grandmother, who brought her through the exact journey in real time. So the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for holding this space and this talk, and thank you to all the other speakers. This is really great. I've been able to watch a couple of your episodes and share it in. I'm one of the founders of Ayahuasca Integration on Facebook, and so if you participated, I feel like within any medicine, there's a lot of people that come to that group. So feel free to look it up. I share Bob's journeys in there as well. So when Bob introduced my talk on like how I was kind of like called to ayahuasca, it starts sooner than that. So I kind of want to lead into what even brought me to that moment of like discovering the tumors, and really also what he talked about, that you can journey into non-ordinary states without medicine, which I had also been doing for many, many years before I was ever called to work with any medicine. And so I think it's been since 2013, I was called to do a spiritual pilgrimage in my early 20s. And it would take me 13 years before I would actually walk it. And so I began to walk out of my life of what I would call self-induced suffering in order to walk into the life that is led from my heart. And that started the journey of backpacking across Europe, where I walked the El Camino in Spain, and I let spirit lead. And this is through that journey through Europe, I ended up meeting a gentleman in Poland who told me about ayahuasca. And as soon as he started talking to me, we were smoking weed in this tiny kitchen in Warsaw, Poland, with a bunch of Polish people. There was a couple other travelers there with me. And he started talking about ayahuasca, like, I really feel like you should meet her. And he was telling me a little bit about her journey. And it was in that space, it was almost like I was activated from the medicine from the first call When somebody shares their experience with you, it's almost like it's an activation. And so that was to me the first time that I was imprinted with her energy back in 2013. I hadn't heard of her before then, but I had been wanting to do this spiritual pilgrimage since of my early 20s. And so once she had imprinted me, I was like, oh, like, I feel like I need to meet this, whoever she is, whatever she is, right? It was just like this connection that I had no knowing of. And once I was on my journey, I went through many, many countries and ended up in the Netherlands, and they do ceremonies in the Netherlands. And I thought it was going to align, like, oh, I'm going to be able to sit with ayahuasca. I just found out about her, like 6 or 7 months before, and now I get to sit with her. But it didn't align then. So what ended up calling me was to go, because they have cafes where you can buy all kinds of mushrooms. So I went and bought like 5 grams of truffles. And this was the first time I sat with mushrooms, and I created ceremony, and I did it by myself. And I had never done any major ceremony by myself. Like I had done LSD like in my early 20s, a couple of times, like saw the trees breathe and, had the video game experience, but nothing ceremonial with medicine, always done like vision questing or Anipis or sweat lodges ceremony, more like Native American, but not with medicine, just with prayer, intention, um, breathing, sweating, just being in the earth. So this was the first time I held space all by myself in ceremony with those substances. And so I ate the medicine. At first I ate half. And I was like, I can't remember like what activates it, because I didn't know anything back then, right? I'm just like, was it orange juice or milk? I'm like, can I eat with this? Because they don't taste great. And it's like this huge big block. It's really dense. And so I ate half, and I'm like sitting there. I don't know if I was sitting there for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to eat the other half. And so like I ate the other half, and I'm in this tiny apartment all by myself, and I don't know what to expect. I'm like, am I going to have crazy visions? What am I going to feel? I have no idea. So once it started getting going and I was listening to music, just laying on the couch, I literally just cried for like 6 hours. And what was amazing is this was like a culmination of the spiritual pilgrimage. It was just like really like a coming home to myself. And that 6 hours really let me take down a wall so I could feel how much I loved myself, how much the universe loved me, how much other people loved me, because I had barricaded that off from trauma for so long. What I had known about trauma, right? And at that time, I was only aware of a couple things of trauma. And what called me, and really what made me walk the spiritual journey, is I felt like I was dying. And then people kept dying around me. So it was just like the inner was matching the outer. And I was like, if I don't do this, I am going to die. And so once I actually come back to the States from that year-long pilgrimage, which I went on not intending to ever come back. I left and walked away from my life, my son, my business, everything, because I knew I consciously had to die to my old self and my old life in order to birth something new. But even coming back to the States, I was still in the dying process. I still was shedding, like I unplugged from the matrix, but then came back into the matrix and still had challenges of picking up my old ways, my old identity, my old way of being in life. And so at the time, I went to a cabin in the woods and just meditated really for like 2 months, and just really went into introspection about, my past year, and knowing the feeling, like this knowing that something wants to be birthed inside me, but not knowing how to live it, not knowing how to be it yet, because there was still too much of my conditioning that was still on me. And at the time, my mother's husband was dying of cancer. And so I ended up, after my pilgrimage and those 2 months of just really reflecting on that year, I went to go and be present with them. And he was actively dying, withering away, like in front of our eyes. And it was pretty brutal. But again, it's like another layer of like the part of me that was dying, you know, um, I feel like a lot of times life is a dream, right? A dream within a dream within a dream. And so when I was seeing how that was being reflected in the pieces and parts of me that were dying, and how this was actually showing up in my life continuously again and again, that's actually when the tumors manifested. When he was about to die, I was in the cabin with them, and this was in northern Michigan. So it was like in the really, really deep cold, lots of snow, like -30, where and they lived 50 miles from a store. So I was literally in the middle of nowhere doing nothing but sitting and being with someone who was dying. Um, and then to be able to reflect, what is that showing up for me? What am I being invited to continuously shed? And I just had this awareness, like if I were to get cancer, I would get breast tumors. And it was like they showed up instantly overnight, just from like having that thought. And I understand that most people don't understand the power of their ability to co-create their reality or manifest their thoughts and feelings and words, and that's okay. You don't have to believe me. You don't even have to believe in any of this. But I know my personal journey and story was a direct reflection of the parts of me that were still very out of alignment and ill and sick and separate within myself, and how they had manifested as tumors in my right breast, which very much was connected and to my dad and the resentment that I was holding in my body from him. And so when I held the tumors, when I discovered them, that's when I made that, like, because I don't believe in Western medicine. I don't believe in the sick care system. I believe in wholeness and empoweredness. And I believe the shamanic practices and indigenous ways are to remind us we are connected to everything, because we are everything embodied. And so I instantly was just like, I feel like once she activated me in Europe, it was like I came to that moment of I need to go to the Amazon and Amazon needs to come to me. And she took me through my entire first ceremony in dream time. And it was so wild because I'd never had a dream that was psychedelic at that level, that I was like, what was that? Like, well, I had no frame of reference. And so I just saw like these toads and frogs and like these just wild colors. And it just felt like really deeply cleansing and healing. But it was just, again, it was like a blip. I woke up and I was like, that was strange. But I remembered it. It was just like when something is important, but you have no idea, no context for it. So it would be like another 2 years later where I'd go and sit with the medicine. And the place that I was going to sit with the medicine 2 years prior to that didn't even exist. They didn't even like serve medicine on the property. So this is how it shows you how time folds. And I've had this happen in many times in my life where I see how that my experience is, there's no time, right? Because everything exists now. And so once I went through the first ceremony, mother had me cleansing myself by putting my hands all over. And again, I don't feel like you need plants to do this, but if you're called, it's because they're very integrated into your heart, into your life, and your vibration. She had me put my hand on my breast, and the two tumors shot out of my body as like two lights. And when I came out of that first ceremony and I touched my body, I was just like, no tumors. And so to backtrack, I was actually, I think, about 170 pounds at the time. And once I got the tumors over those course of 2 years, I could no longer wear bras. I lost 70 pounds within 6 months. My whole right side of my body started having pain and numbness. But once I touched the tumors and made the declaration of I need to go to the Amazon, it needs to come to me, I immediately put out of my mind that I had tumors in my breast. I never revisited that until I came to that ceremony, because that's how much I was committed to not being a part of out here and in disillusionment with the truth of who I am. And so, yes, medicine can heal us, but it's really us healing us. And I was reminded of that in that ceremony. A lot of people go to ayahuasca, like, fix me, heal me. And it would take many, many journeys, many years, even after that first one and those tumors went, to get to the root of the trauma, of the blackness, of the cancer root that was in me. Was that because my father was my main abuser for my entire childhood. He molested and raped me for most of my childhood. And so the resentment that I held was so dark and so deep, and it was so separate from who I was, that I had no way to come home to myself fully without the help as this plant ally, because she partnered with me in consciousness and I could expand enough. I began to heal layer by layer, ceremony by ceremony, piece by piece, remembering who I've always been, the truth. And I don't know what time, if that's like 15, if I've used up my 20 minutes or not. Um,
I told you, go till you're done.
yeah, so I feel completely honored that she called me, because I feel like it was a mutual call. I feel like I was called back when I was 19 and on the shamanic path. And every time I've done ceremony, it's a reminder of that. Every time I'm called to take a dose. And a lot of times psychedelics get a really bad rap, especially from people that are addicts or in the AA community, because they're scared. They're scared that it's going to be something that they're going to get addicted to and they're going to misuse. And that's rampant still in the culture. And so I feel like my story just reminds people I didn't come to medicines um, as an alcoholic or an addict. I just came because I felt like I was dying. And then I did. I manifested an illness to actually show me I was dying, right? Because it was true. And I feel like the majority of the people on the planet right now are dying. This is what's happening collectively. We are dying to an old way of being. And a lot of the ancient ways are coming back up, but they're asking and being invited to come up in a way that is being birthed in a new way, which is an unknown way, which even from ancient traditions and indigenous people is scary, because we don't know the way forward. We're being invited in to illuminate a path that has never been walked before. At the same time, it's always been here before, right? So it's like being able to hold that paradox and that contradiction simultaneously and letting our hearts lead. And to me, that's the one thing that has kept me on this path and continues to have me work with ayahuasca whenever she calls me to sit or drink, or whenever the mushrooms call me to sit and partake. I know that they have more teachings because they help me move into feelings that I've struggled to feel my entire life and likely for lifetimes. That our job as humans, right? The hue being God means God, man. I'm here to feel and experience and express all of that. And so if we don't live one without the other, we're separate. And our separation consciousness is just being brought up in ceremony, in the medicine world, and it's also being brought up collectively right now. And we're being invited back home. We're being invited back into deeper places of loving ourselves and each other. And that's tough. It's been tough for me. You know, one of my biggest barriers on my path is like, I know, because I had such a solid spiritual foundation before I ever came into medicine. I would never have walked away from my life had I not been firmly planted with God then, had I not really trusted the universe, but I was being asked to trust deeper, to surrender deeper in a way I had never been asked before. And each time I'm called to ceremony, I feel like I'm being invited to surrender deeper, to let go of more of who I used to be so that I can step into more of who I am. Most people are like, I'm becoming, but it's you already are. You already have always been this person. We just chose to separate from that from the beginning. And so as we unravel and release and let go and unlearn the deep conditions and lies of separation consciousness, we come back to our remembrance. Not that we're better than one another, not that we're elevated or on a pedestal, but that we are one and the same, and we are brothers and sisters united on this path. And to me, this is what this medicine has brought me. This is what this path has done. And I get to share my story now, which is very difficult because I just told my mother this past Christmas that, yeah, my father molested me since I was an infant and began raping me around the age of 14. And she can't believe it. You know, I have a hard time seeing that. And most of the times, people aren't going to believe you, but it's not for them to believe. It's for you. It's your path, your journey to live. The only person that needs to believe you is you. And so when I believe me and I accept me and I honor these stories that are mine to live and embody, I own the power of who I am. People can't believe you because they can't meet you until they've met themselves. And my mother and many of her friends and many in that generation haven't met themselves because they're deeply separate still. And it's not for me to wake them up. It's not for me to remind them. It is just for me to be me. That's it. That's all I'm being invited, is to come back home into the wholeness of who I am and live that so fully that my fragrance and light infects other people. And then how they take that in, how they drink that, how they absorb that, how they see that is for them, not for me. And that eliminates all the judgment that I've held with myself for the people that I called into my journey to teach me about separation. And that's really, really tough for a lot of trauma and victims of sexual abuse, of coming back into the wholeness of creation. That when I've moved in my experiences with meditations way before medicine, I've merged with God many times before ever experiencing medicine. So again, I had that solid foundation of really understanding that, but then I was asked to move more into the human of feeling it, feeling it, feeling it, feeling the heartache, feeling the pain that my child couldn't feel from the trauma, and holding her through those moments because that trauma has already happened. The difference between trauma and a traumatic event is, you know, the trauma is just stored emotions that haven't released and moved. It's just energy that hasn't moved. And the traumatic event is what happened to you. And so being able to really kind of understand that and then move into a loving place to hold space for myself, I was able to integrate these pieces that had been separate from me for a very, very long time. So thank you so much, Bob, for letting me share my story. I really appreciate it. I feel so blessed.
So this has been season 4, episode 5 of Ouroboros Story Hour, True Tales of Healing in Altered States. Season 4, episode 6 is going to air on February 18th, 2021 from 7:30 to 10 p.m. We're always looking for storytellers. I think I've got one slot left for February. So if anyone feels called to share, please contact me. You can get me on Facebook at Ouroboros Story Hour. You can PM me through there, or um, you can PM me at bobjcohen@gmail.com. Either one of those would be great. So thank you. So thank you, Angela. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mason. Thank you, Kristen. It's been a pleasure and an honor to hold space and to hear all your stories. Thank you so much.